Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It is your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School podcast as we recover from a week in which the vibes took a hit. Can vibes take a hit? I'm going to ask my co-host filling in for today. Jeremy Cohen is off doing Jeremy Cohen things, probably reeling after his loss in the predictions battle for this week, keeping me alive by a thread, but I'm still alive. So filling in to try to, I don't know, are you going to pep us up, Benjy? What is your role here today? What are you doing here, Benjy Ritholtz?
I'm just standing in for Jeremy. I figure when you hired / brought on,
that was so underwhelming.
When you brought on another redheaded pale Jew, the idea was essentially for this pod to happen where I could just stand in and just do a perfect imitation. Problem is I'm not nearly as smart as Jeremy, so this is going to be a poor rendition of a Jeremy Cohen podcast. I'll do my best though. But yeah, I'll get the vibes going. We'll get the vibes towards immaculate again. We'll try our best.
The nice thing about the all of the pale redheaded Jews on this pod is they're all smarter than me in different ways. All smarter than the olive-skinned Italian, as it were. So we talked actually earlier this week already. We talked, I believe, after the Miami game. Was that right?
Was that Wednesday night? We talked on a Wednesday night. That sounds right.
That does sound right. Yeah, we talked on a Wednesday night. And the only thing that happened since then is the Orlando game. But I'm happy to. Well, I'm always happy to talk to you, but I'm especially happy to talk to you again. Because I feel like even though there's only been one game that has passed since we last spoke, for me at least, and I don't know how you feel, kind of getting away from this week because it's been, several days since the Knicks have played, and kind of like trying to take stock and also, we'll get into some of this stuff later, but like just getting away for a minute, I think was helpful to me. I don't know if I am, after a week in which the Knicks went 0-3 and, just for anybody who needs the recap, gave up a bazillion points to the Timberwolves, lost by 6 at home to a team without Anthony Edwards, and then lost, I think it was a well-played game, 7-point game to the Heat, tight game pretty much the whole way through, and at the same time a game that kind of felt like the Heat had control over throughout most of the game, even though the score indicated otherwise. And then this Magic game most recently without Jalen Brunson. I stepping back and taking stock, I don't know if I feel better or worse about this, where this team is at right now. It's just the best word that I could use to describe this week, and then I want to hear what you have to say, is like kind of unnerving, because this team over the course of 72 games did, maybe not 72 games because of the first third of the season was quite bad, but most of that time, and even during some of that early going when they had some like must wins that they had to get, they got them. The West Coast trip and a couple of games, like they undid so many narratives from both last season and from like the last 20 plus years of being a Knicks fan. And now these last 3 games, I think, have a lot of things creeping in the back of our minds. Like, oh, wait a minute. Is this actually more of a house of cards than we realize, or stuff like that? So I just like, big picture wise, where is your mind at with this team after the last 3 games?
My perception of the team hasn't changed a ton overall. I think there's some questions that maybe we had kind of gone away, and I think we're kind of re-entering now our brains, such as, can Julius Randle be emotionally mature enough on a night in, night out basis to be like a real permanent piece in the future of the Knicks? I think that's a fair question. It's one we certainly had last year. It's one we've really had since he's been here. But the difference now is that there's a floor of performance. Like even during these games when he's kind of losing control emotionally, I think the floor of his performance has risen. Like he hasn't played badly. Like he hasn't shot it great, but he's making an impact nonetheless, even when he's having these kind of moments. But I think that question's crept back up, and I think fairly. I think the Mitchell Robinson question is, can we get a consistent, locked-in Mitchell Robinson who is such a key to this team's success on a night in, night out basis, both ends doing his job. I think that those questions, both based on his unfortunate social media presence that's ticked up recently and kind of the sense you get from him, and then the play itself on both ends hasn't been as solid. And then I think the fair question to ask is like Jalen Brunson, the way he plays on both ends, I think he takes a lot of hits, takes a lot of charges. Those take their toll. And a guy who is very physical on offense, hits the floor a lot on offense. It's not easy. And you wonder, I'm certainly starting to wonder, is there like going to be, not that he's had like any terrible injury this season, but kind of nicked up here and there. And yeah, I don't know, that starts to worry you as well in terms of the sustainability of how great he's been and how can he be in the lineup day in, day out playing this many minutes with this kind of load. That's a question that's kind of crept up. So I think those questions coming back in are a bit unnerving. I agree, but like the team's performance, even this week, wasn't that terrible. I mean, you can look at kind of the shooting performances of some of the Minnesota and Miami, all three actually, because Orlando went off
in the fourth,
in the fourth quarter. I was looking earlier. The Knicks were top 5 in 3-point percentage against before this week started. Now they're 9th. And that's late in the season. So it gives you a sense of how great those teams shot over the course of this week. So I think some of it was shooting regression or progression. And I think some of it was just those questions creeping back in. So overall, I don't know. I'm in a place where maybe with the help of some other teams losing, I feel okay about where they are. I still really want that 5 seed. I think it's still very much in reach. You just got to kind of get Brunson back and key back in, especially those two guys in Randle and Robinson.
You brought up a lot there, and I want to get to all of it because I think there's a lot of different things to pick apart. But we should let the listeners know. So we are recording this as of right now. It is 8:10 and 56 seconds p.m. on Sunday night. I am looking at the television screen about 10 feet away from me. The Orlando Magic are winning 115-99. I believe Mikal Bridges may have just gotten fouled on a 3-point attempt. Not smart. Young Magic team, but there's 3:53 left. We hope that the Magic could pull this out after they pulled one out against us. So we'll get back to that in a bit. We're actually going to do a whole thing on the playoff races. But you mentioned 3 things, Julius, and in different ways: Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Jalen Brunson. It's funny that the 2 things that you didn't mention, which I think have been on the top, have been on the minds of many a Knicks fan over the last several days. Well, you kind of mentioned the defense. So like that's, I think, its own thing. And then RJ. And I have a funny feeling the reason you didn't mention RJ is because like I'm assuming your perception of RJ has nothing in the last week has really changed it that much.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, trying to remember the 3 games that he actually played against each of his performance against, I know Orlando was really bad. And
the previous 4 games, he was really good playing within himself and taking 13 shots in 4.
So it was really one bad game.
It was one horrible game.
It was really horrible. I'm not saying really no, bad. But no, like do I wish that he just like finished the season on a roll of just being really good? Yeah, but like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think with all the RJ discourse, I think what's not mentioned enough, and I think people expected more, and I think it's fair to expect more, and certainly on some nights you expect a whole lot more, and maybe some fans expected a real leap, and I don't think that's happened, but I do think still at the end of the day, we've seen improvements in areas offensively that are really important. And they don't jump off the page. And it's not like he's now top 5 percentage in the league in any of these things, but finishing at the rim, around the rim, floater range, all of it, which is the key to RJ Barrett because he's there a lot, has all improved. It's all improved. Percentages are up pretty significantly, 5-6% in all those areas. And I think end of the day, he's a frustrating player. We expect more. Defensively, especially, I think it's been a very frustrating year. The shot hasn't fallen, but I don't know, the shot, it may never come. I don't know if he's going to be a 35% shooter at any point. I don't know. But I do think it's important to recognize the progress he has made, even though it's been a frustrating season in large part. I think taking a step back and looking at the whole thing of this very young, still very, very young player who does some good things. The fact that he's in the lane as much as he is, and he's now finishing better, is really important. So I'm not that discouraged about RJ because maybe my expectations aren't as high. I didn't expect any kind of star leap. I think he's gotten better in some important areas. It's a difficult role that he's in right now, trying to fit as the third guy behind Brunson and Randle. I think he can do it. He's shown it a lot in the last few weeks. Orlando game kind of as the exception, but I don't think any differently about RJ now than I did a month ago. I don't know if you do.
No, I don't. I co-sign every word of what you said. The reason I wanted to bring him up was because it was, one, he has been a topic of conversation, and two, it was a very bad performance. And the thing that got me from when you threaded the game, did you just get frustrated at one point and stop threading? Because it was a shorter thread.
What do you want from me? It was a terrible game.
No, I know.
How much time should I spend on it?
No, you spent however much time you spent on it was too much time. But the play that got me was when the two RJ clips you had, and the one where Obi was in. Not only was Obi in the corner, but Hardenstein was before RJ even drove, he was going to set the back screen.
Set a perfect pin-in screen, perfect
beautiful
execution. And I clipped two of them. The Grimes one I think was a bit more questionable, but I still think he should have made that pass in real time. I thought it, where he spun and just went up with the floater instead of kind of seeing anything in his peripheral vision. I thought Grimes was open, but that one was egregious because, as you said, this is something the Knicks work on because they've done it and executed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That you just said. That's what the thing is that gets under my skin, because it goes back to my analogy I've used a few times. Everybody, whether they're playing great or like Emmanuel Quickley has a game where he could be 1 for 8 or whatever, at least everybody is, and we should say, by the way, Emmanuel Quickley, as you said in the thread, that was the worst half of basketball he probably played all season.
Yeah.
It was inexplicable because clearly there was he was between, am I driving here? Am I passing here? This, that, the other thing. But at the very least, I'm willing to bet that his intentionality is in the right place, which is something I feel comfortable saying for everybody else on this team. Everybody's rowing in the right direction, whether they row well or poorly is a different story. And then you get a play like that from RJ where it's where is he rowing? Because it doesn't seem to be in unison with everybody else. That's it. We don't have to talk about RJ anymore, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, to the IQ point, I think it's directly related to him starting. I think you see it when he starts, where he's very in between getting other people involved, getting to my shot. And I think he's best served. I think the reason it's not an accident that he has excelled to such an extent as that kind of super six man where he comes into the game, and just lets and flows, right? Where it's not about getting Julius's shots. It's not about RJ getting his pistol out. It's like I come in and I run the show and I do my thing. And I think it's just very fairly an adjustment for him starting the game and trying to live in those two different worlds. So, Brunson coming back, I think will fix that pretty quickly.
So that leads me to my next question. Of the three things that you mentioned, the Brunson injury thing, the Randle thing, and the Mitch being, more consistency on the court, but also a little bit of the tomfoolery off of it. Which of those three concerns you the most for the rest of this season? And if the answer is none of them concern me that much for the rest of the season, say that. And which of those three concern you the most moving forward?
I love that you asked it that way because I was going to have a different answer for the two of them. I think short term for this season, it's Mitch.
Okay.
Because it's funny when he doesn't gobble up offensive rebounds and isn't as sure a rim protector in the paint, his drop off may be more impactful than anybody else's drop off on the team. Just because
is that pick and roll coverage specifically?
Yes.
Because
pick and roll coverage and just general help. I think he's just hasn't been as locked in and focused. He's just been late on some rotations.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. Is that not the main culprit of the recent defensive kind of malaise, but would you put that as one of the main culprits of the recent defense?
I absolutely would. Yes, I absolutely would. I thought he got badly outplayed by Gobert, frankly. And it was disappointing because that's a guy you basically look at as what do I want Mitch to be? I want Mitch to be certainly on defense, Rudy Gobert, generally a drop defender, but who is on point and contests everything and is just a force down there night in, night out. That's why Rudy Gobert is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, is because he just makes his impact felt every single night. And it's not that he's a perfect player. He's not.
No.
And he can get exposed at times, just like Mitch can. And I'm less concerned about the stuff like where a stretch 5 hurts him. Like, that's just that is what it is. But when he's getting beat by Rudy, was like, that's the guy you're able to play drop because it's Rudy Gobert in there. So it's not like you have to stretch. And you're still like he just wasn't impactful that night. He just wasn't. Like, he was late. He was unsure in drop. He wasn't contesting everything. Gobert made some post-ups on him and some floaters on him. And it was just like, I need you to be there that night. And I think when his level drops even 5-10%, what it does, the word I like to use is the integrity of the defense falls apart. Like, he's the backbone, he's the spine. When that goes, there's just not that much there defensively for the Knicks. They're not that good. The personnel's not that good defensively.
Yeah, right? And I feel like what you're really saying here, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that when your Jalen Brunsons and your Julius Randles and your RJ Barretts, and occasionally your Quentin Grimes and your Emmanuel Quickleys and your Josh Harts gets beat, and Obi Toppin, we should say, get beat off the dribble, when Mitch is just unable to be a 2-on-1 or one man pick and roll defense against 2 players and do it aptly, you don't maybe notice the point of attack foibles of those other guys. And now it's like, oh wow, the Knicks are getting beaten off the point of attack. Well, that actually happens, more
it does. It does. And I do think it's been worse this week. This past week, I thought their point of attack defense was bad, and that's certainly part of it. But I definitely didn't think Mitch was quite at that level that we saw when he first got off of his injury, whatever it was. And, since that January through till about a week, 2 weeks ago, I thought he was playing at an extremely high level, and I thought that dropped. You really boil it down to the numbers, right? Like, the reason the Knicks offense is really good is because that guy's on the offensive boards. Like, they don't shoot the ball well. Like, the reason that they're able to be successful offense, despite the fact that they're not a good shooting team, is because of his offensive rebounding and Hartenstein when he comes in. But Mitch plays more minutes. It's Mitch's offensive rebounding that keeps the offense alive. That hasn't been quite. I mean, he's gotten some offensive rebounds this past week. I just didn't think it was as active, as constant, as relentless. It's not the same. And then that's their offense. That's what they rely on so much. And then on defense, it's the opposite. Actually, the reason their defense has been good since at least January is because the opposing shooting is bad. Why is the opposing shooting bad? Like, they don't force turnovers, the Knicks. They don't rebound it all that great. They send teams to the line. They're like average at it.
Average amount, yeah.
Not bad. The reason that defense has been successful is because the effective field goal percentage against has always been really good. Why is it always really good? Because you have a rim protector like Mitchell Robinson that allows you to give up the right shots, the shots you want to give up. And that if they're trying to get to the rim, they're not scoring at the rim, right? That's what he does. And if that level drops X amount %, the defense just isn't very good. And we've certainly seen the defense fall apart. And it's not just Mitch. I have a lot, there's a lot going on defensive end, including just good shooting that we can't necessarily anticipate. But I think his drop has been a real problem. In the short term, that's my answer. In the long term, the answer is Julius Randle to me.
So let's just
go ahead.
Let's just jump in here and say, so for anybody again who may be dropping in and hasn't really paid close attention to the last week as you were watching whatever March Madness. So Randle started the week off scoring the 3rd most points in a Knick uniform in team history, tied actually. With was it Richie Guerin, right? And then but also picked up a technical foul in that game, and then picked up technical fouls against Miami and against Orlando. And we should note also that I think part of the Julius Randle story is the fact that the officiating was as Orlando beats Brooklyn. Hooray. We'll get back to that in a second. Yep, giddy up. The officiating has been bad. It was bad in the Miami game. I don't know if it was a huge deal in the Orlando game. Maybe they got a slightly not great whistle. It was poor in the Minnesota game. So it's been a thing. But that being said, yeah, Julius Randle, concern long term.
Yeah, and it's really just a matter of what is he on a contending team, both from a role perspective on the court, which is like, if the usage goes down considerably, what does he do for your team? Is he where he needs to be defensively as the 3rd option? Because a 3rd option needs to be good defensively. And his defensive performance has been really poor. I thought Orlando, he was poor. That's times against Miami.
You're being polite.
Poor. Yeah. Just not engaged. We talk about, I think that's been a big change for this team since January, is just his level of engagement, the hard switching, the contesting everything. I just don't think it's been there. And so it's from a role perspective, is his defense going to be good enough? Because he's going to shoot it well enough. What does he look like in an offense where he's not a focal point, or certainly not the focal point, is number one. And then number two is like, man, what, like, emotionally, he's done such a good job this year. I give him so much credit. And he's talked about it a bunch, is like the way he's kind of refocused himself and the Zen and the meditation before the game. I think it's really mattered and played an important part in like his resurgence on the court. And it's unnerving, as the word used earlier in the pod. It's unnerving to see him kind of fall apart. And that Orlando thing was a temper tantrum. And that lashed out at his team. And you just hate to see that. And it's not that it happens. It's not like he's not the only person in the NBA to yell at a teammate on the court this year or in any, like, it's just, we've seen it from him before, and he's kind of fallen back into this ref arguing teammate, teammate going at teammate. It's just, you don't like to see that, and you worry about it. And what's his standing on this team, and how do guys feel about him? I'll let you. I have one more thing to say about it, but it looks like you're about to say.
No. I was actually going to say I'm going to save my thoughts on this for a segment that we have coming up later. But I just wanted to say that I agreed with you that the Mitch thing, for all the reasons you explained, was like my primary concern for the rest of this season. Let's pick up the Randle. Well, what else did you want to say about Randle? Then we'll move on.
Did you happen to see the interview, or what I don't know, it was a podcast with Reggie Bullock and Theo Pinson?
Yes.
It was a joke, right? Okay, so for anyone watching,
lot of truth in jest.
They were talking about how they were reflecting back on their time with the Knicks and how, like, you had no choice but to play defense under Tibbs.
Reggie Bullock. We should say Reggie Bullock's time with the Knicks, as he was talking to Theo,
who also was on that team, right? So then and then Theo kind of cracks the joke at the end, which was, unless you're Julius Randle, right? And it was a joke and very funny. I certainly laughed at it, and yet, this has been going around for a long time, that there's no accountability, that Julius Randle doesn't have the same level of accountability for Tibbs as others do, for whatever reason that is. I do take that jesting comment with a bit of like, man, if they're saying it and joking about it and laughing about it, they believe it, right? Like, it's a real thing that, for whatever reason, I have a feeling it has to just do with what Tibbs feels like Julius Randle needs in order to succeed. I'm starting to think that, especially with what happened last year, that there's a fear that Tibbs, if he is too critical of Randle, may lose Randle, because that's just who Randle might be. So I think that might be the reason for it. But it is concerning that, like, it seems to be a thing out there that all his teammates feel, and former teammates feel, that, like, he's not held to that same standard. And you see it kind of play out, and that's concerning. Even after the game, Tibbs wouldn't even say, like, Randle screwed up. He wouldn't say it. Like, he's like, said something like, we have to, where it's tough as a team.
He gave a coach speak answer.
Yeah. And it's like, you could still say, like, you can't, it's okay to say, like, Julius has to be better. It's okay to say that.
When absolutely it is. And it's not, to me, this is what it always came back to last year, and which is why I think I got in hot water with a lot of people, where I was going over and above to defend Tibbs in this specific situation. Because to me, it was less about how could Tibbs not hold this player accountable. It was more about the fact that we're having this conversation about what is the right thing for a coach to do with a player whose mental, emotional, so on and so forth, volatility is such that we need to be asking these questions, which clearly we do, because we are, and because we had the week that we had. That in and of itself that's the lead story, and then everything else is secondary. All right, I said I wasn't going to say anything else because I want to get back to this in a little bit. First, personal injury report presented by our friends at Weiss and Rosenblum. Call Weiss and Rosenblum today at 212-366-6100, or visit them at weissandrosenblum.com for more information. No case is too big or too small. Personal attention to your potential personal injury matter is their priority. Consultations are free, which means you can call them up, tell them what you got. They will not charge you a dime. And if they do take your case, they don't get paid unless you do. Once more, 212-366-6100. Previous results don't guarantee future outcomes, but if you think you might have a case, speak with a veteran attorney, not a rookie. I don't think we need to say anything about Mitch. He had a bruised knee, played versus Orlando. I assume that he's fine.
Thanks to a couple of tackles by the Miami Heat, held ankle from Julius Randle that the ref was looking at and somehow didn't say anything about, which was dangerous. And then a Max Strus body tackle drag down that he landed on his knee. I don't know which one caused it or if any, but frustrating that they were playing him really physical and seems like he got banged up in that game.
I don't know if we talked. I don't think we talked about it. My theory is that the Heat, it's really more apt for like, I'm sure there are football teams that I could make this analogy to, but I can't think of one right now. But like a football team that plays a certain way and the refs are just kind of like, what do we do?
Yeah.
I guess the basketball analogy in a weird way, it's not analogous in terms of like style, but like Shaq, it's like, how do you referee Shaq? Like, how do you?
I think Golden State benefits from this in terms of moving screens.
Oh yeah,
I think they set so many moving screens and it's such a big part of their offense that refs feel like I can't call this every time.
Yeah,
like I can't call the moving screen every play, so like we have to let some of them go. Miami certainly, they do.
It's an advantage for them. So, they I guess good for them. Yes, it was egregious and it was annoying. Hopefully, I don't want to talk about the refs again. I hate when the refs become an issue. I'm not saying it's. I really
only felt it in Miami, but I agree with you. Yeah.
Jalen Brunson. So practiced in full Sunday as we're speaking. Missed the Orlando game. He's listed as questionable day to day with a sprained hand. I don't know what to take from that.
Has there been any reporting on when he did it? I haven't seen anything. I'm wondering if he did.
If there is reporting, I haven't seen it, and
it is an injury that you see a lot when guys do things like take charges because you break your fall, and that's a really good way to sprain your hand. I don't know if that's the case, but something to monitor. It's like that's a play that people get hurt on a lot, and he does it a lot. And if he, it's like when you make the transition from really good role player to star, you have to start asking the question of like what's worth it from a physical standpoint. Especially in the regular, like it's serious, like it's a real question. Like,
but isn't that dicey? Because
it is. It's very dicey,
specifically for Brunson, because his value on defense is those sorts of plays.
100%. It is. I don't know the answer, and I'm making a lot of assumptions. I don't know if that's how he hurt himself.
He falls a lot. He gets a lot. He's on the
floor. He's on the floor a lot, and I don't know. I wonder if that's a conversation probably for the offseason. If the Knicks think about, hey man, like it's not every game is not everything. I know it's not this coach, so we'll see.
Well, you know what it is.
Question.
You know what it is to me, and this again, kind of getting ahead of myself because we have an essay question coming up, which I think this might come up. Emmanuel Quickley did say in a very wonderful article, Jake Fisher, who is now with Yahoo, wrote. He interviewed Emmanuel Quickley one-on-one, and Quickley said, in no uncertain terms, I want to be a starter. Well, not this year. He said, I want to do whatever's right for the team this year, and he basically said, like, for as long as I'm here, I'm going to do what's best for the team. But he said, what do you think I'm putting all this work in for? Like, I want to be a starter someday, and he did not mince words. I wonder if there is a world where the Knicks look at Jalen Brunson as a guy who maybe moving forward, because of these nicks and dents and dings and bruises and things, is going to be more like a 60, 65 game a year player as opposed to a 75, 80 game a year player. I mean, nobody plays 80 games anymore except Julius Randle. But like, you get the gist. And do they go to Quickley this summer and be like, look, we're going to pay you like a starter. Doesn't mean maybe you'll start here eventually. We can't guarantee you that, but we're going to pay you like a starter because we know, 15, 20, 25 games a year here, you are going to be the starter. I wonder how much that might, I don't know. I mean, money talks and bullshit walks. So that's my default.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it is interesting. I think he's proven himself as such an invaluable piece, whether it's at the 1 or the 2 or a fill-in starter. He's a super six man at this point. He's essentially a starter. He finishes a lot of games. Like, I think most players in his position, I assume, would say the exact same thing, which is like, I want to be a starter. But as you said, I think the Knicks are going to give him a nice offer, and I imagine I don't know. Chances are very good, I think, that he signs with the Knicks and signs an extension with the Knicks this summer.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. Even though I'm have a newsletter coming out tomorrow in which I at least broach the idea of like why it might make sense to not move him specifically, but to like break up the young core this upcoming summer. But I'll save those thoughts for a few minutes from now. Yeah, I just don't know, because if he views himself as, I don't know, one of the top 15 starting point guards in basketball, if he had the opportunity, well then, if you're a top 15 starting point guard in basketball, then you're a max player. That's kind of the way things are. And if he doesn't feel like he's going to get that opportunity here, I don't know. It was a thought that I had, but we could move on to relevant topic, the playoff race. So who wants to hear about tiebreakers, folks? Yeah, I know it's everybody's most exciting thing. So as of right now, the New York Knickerbockers are, despite the fact they just had an 0-3
unbelievable
week,
man.
Isn't this wild?
It's unbelievable that Miami lost, and then it's a miracle the Knicks are still 2 up, right? I mean,
they're 2 up as of right now, with a game obviously ahead of them against Miami, which we'll get to the ramifications of that game. Tiebreaker against Miami and tiebreaker against Brooklyn. Now, where the tiebreakers are concerned, if Miami and I believe Atlanta lost tonight, is that reflected in the standings already? Yeah, I believe that is. So now Atlanta, bottom of the East play-in bracket, Atlanta and Toronto, 37 and 38. Chicago, after their win at the Lakers today, 36 and 38. That's shaping up to be.
Yeah, it looks like the 10 have been pretty much solidified. I don't see the Pacers making a run here. They're now 2.5 back.
And that is, in theory, good news for the Knicks, because 2 of the last 3 games of the season for the Knicks are against the Indiana Pacers. So Are they going to be tanking it up? We'll see. Or does Tyrese Haliburton have something special planned? I feel like he still hasn't gotten his in the Wally Zerbiak department. Anyway, so 2 games up on Brooklyn and Miami. Have the tiebreaker against Miami. If Miami wins the game coming up this week on Wednesday night, Miami will not officially own the tiebreaker, but they will essentially own the tiebreaker because they are going to win their division over the Atlanta Hawks, and that gives them the tiebreaker. The Brooklyn Nets, as of right now, the Knicks own the tiebreaker against them. Here's why that is dicey. The Knicks have an 8-8 division record, and that's the first tiebreaker for these 2 teams because they split the head-to-head. The Nets are 7-8 within division. They have 1 more divisional game remaining, and that is against the Philadelphia 76ers on the last day of the season, which you would think, oh, great, except maybe not. Because as we are sitting here today, the Philadelphia 76ers have fallen 2.5 games back of the second-place Boston Celtics. Only 2 up on the Cavs. That's maybe getting interesting. The point is, if things are sewn up for them on the last day of the season, you better believe the Sixers are going to sit their whole team. And if the Nets are still fighting for something, you could count on them winning that game, and thus winning not only another division game to split that tiebreaker, which would then go to the next tiebreaker, which is conference record. Now, again, we're getting into the weeds here, but as of the moment, at this moment, the Knicks are 28 and 19 within conference, which is a game and a half up on the Brooklyn Nets, who are 27 and 21 within conference. Now, the fact that the Knicks are up 2 in the loss column, I think, is important to note, because the Knicks Eastern Conference games remaining, yes, they have the one against Miami and they have one against Cleveland, but they also have one in Washington, who I believe is probably going to start tanking.
I think it's home versus Washington.
Home versus Washington. Sorry. Home versus Washington. We should say the next 4 games are at home, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So
they have 5 remaining at home and 2 on the road, which yes. theoretically is good, although they've been better on the road. Yeah.
Steph Bondi would disagree. So Miami, Cleveland home. Those are Eastern Conference games. Washington home, at Indiana, and then Indiana at home. So New York has 5 remaining Eastern Conference games. Here are Brooklyn's remaining Eastern Conference games. Atlanta at home, at Detroit, Orlando at home, Philly at home. So there is a chance. What's that?
think a bit tougher on our end than in Brooklyn.
It's harder on our end. You figure the Atlanta game is going to be, and again, depending on what's going on with Philly, if you figure the Nets are going to go 3-1 in their remaining conference games, that would put them, and assuming they beat Philly as one of those wins, that would have them finishing with a conference record of 30 and 22, which would mean to win that tiebreaker, the Knicks would only need to win 3 of their remaining conference games. So they could lose to Miami, lose to Cleveland, beat Indiana both times, and beat Washington, and still get that conference tiebreaker. And if by some chance the Nets went 4-0 in the remaining conference games, which is possible.
I would say 2-2 is more likely than 4-0.
I would too, but just to complete the thought exercise, if this goes to and assuming the Knicks don't go like 2-3 within conference for the remaining games, but let's just assume it goes to the next tiebreaker after that. It is games against teams within your conference that make the playoffs, which I'm assuming is going to be judged on just the top 6 as opposed to the top 8, because we can't do the top 8 because they haven't played the play-in yet. That's good news for the Knicks because they are going to finish with a better record against teams that make the playoff field. So when you extrapolate it out, unless the Nets can finish with a better record than the Knicks are in all likelihood going to have the tiebreaker against Brooklyn, which is good news. And that is why this Orlando game, Eastern Conference game, was such an important game for the Nets to lose. This was a big deal that the Nets lost this game tonight.
It was.
And then last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you for any thoughts you have. As far as Miami is concerned, I was saying, I think I said it on Twitter the other day, I was actually rooting for the Heat in the game against Brooklyn because I wanted to further eradicate Brooklyn's tiebreaker chances and send them further down the standings. And my rationale was not completely only about Brooklyn, but also to do with Miami. And here's why. If the Knicks beat Miami on Wednesday, they're going to finish ahead of the Heat. There's just too much going in their favor. Not officially, they will still have to win some more games, but for all intents and purposes, if the Knicks win that game, it's obviously a loss for the Heat, it's a win for the Knicks, and they get the tiebreaker. That's the big thing. So I felt like the Heat could win against the Nets, and the Knicks could still have their cake and eat it too if they beat the Heat. If the Knicks lose to the Heat on Wednesday, I mean, never say never. I personally have a tough time seeing them getting the 5 seed.
So here's the counter to that. Even if the Knicks do lose to Miami, two things. Number one, I think it should be noted that the next Miami game is going to be a back-to-back for Miami. And it's a tough back-to-back. It's at Toronto and at New York. So they're traveling from Toronto on Tuesday night into New York. Toronto, not only is that like tough travel-wise, playing in Toronto is never like a simple, easy game. Like it's going to be a physical, tough battle. And then you're coming
Toronto
to New York.
Toronto is tied to be in the 8th spot, which that's a massive fucking deal. That's a huge deal.
Well, so they're playing hard. So that's not going to be an easy game. So that's a tough back-to-back. And in that sense, I think the Knicks should be, and it's in New York, I think the Knicks should be looking at this one that they should win based on those circumstances. I think that should be noted, number one. The other thing is, even if they don't win that game, I will say that Miami has remaining.
Here, so go through the games.
5 of the, so it's at Toronto, at New York, home for Dallas, which we'll talk about it. At Detroit, which is a win. At Philly, which I think 3 games left. I think Philadelphia's still going to have one to play for. At Washington, and then home for Orlando. Now,
who seems to have no intent on tanking at any point.
Who, for all we know, is going to be in the 10th seed and like by the end of this whole thing. But they're really good, Orlando. They're a tough game, obviously, and Brooklyn has to play them again later also.
Yes.
But anyway, so 5 of those 7 games are on the road, which is tough for Miami remaining, whereas the Knicks are home heavy, the opposite, 5 out of 7 at home. And so, those 2 points, look, I still think the Knicks finish 5. I think the schedule favors it. I think the tiebreakers are in a good spot. I think the fact that Miami's coming in on a back-to-back from Toronto is a really good thing for this team. Hopefully they have Brunson back. I think the Knicks being able to hopefully have a nice get well win on tomorrow night against Houston. That's a big deal for this team. I think that's going to go a long way. They need to just play well, do their job. And as I think we've seen also, by the way, that Charlotte loss wasn't quite as bad as we thought it was. Team's playing well.
We're going to get there in a second.
But this Houston, you got to win the game. You got to beat Houston because you know Miami's going to beat Detroit. You know Brooklyn's going to beat Detroit. And Brooklyn has Houston as well in a couple nights. So I think you really have to win Monday night. You go good vibes. You get a night off in between. That Miami game is going to be huge.
It is going to be huge. I will say I do not think the Knicks are going to fall out of the play of the top 6. I think there is a part of me that thinks they need to beat Miami to stay in the 5. At the same time, it would not surprise me in the least if they lost to Miami and then went and beat Cleveland and then finished the season winning. I mean, I could even see them finishing the season winning 5 in a row, but at the very least, like 4 out of 5. Like I think somehow, some way, by hook or by crook, this team will go 5-2 the rest of the way. I think unless Brunson is unless it's a Brunson thing, that's it. Okay, before we move on to our essay question, Dallas Mavericks.
Dallas Mavericks. When a team acquires Kyrie Irving, it's a shock when it doesn't just all go really perfectly and seamlessly. One would think. What do they say about Kevin Durant, the most easily adaptable superstar of all time?
Yes, that is exactly.
Plug and play. Kyrie Irving, 3-8 since required. Great job. What a disaster of a franchise. Before we get to the Knicks, relevance. Holy cow! What a disaster. They might screw this up. They might screw Luka up. He might leave.
Let's just briefly on Twitter today. You interjected basically into a conversation. Shout out to XJ, who
so
rude. You're very rude. XJ was making what on the surface is a cogent point, which is like if the Mavs were smart, they would tank. And you push back with like, well, we might need to read between the lines here. And I think and what you were getting at, not to put words in your mouth, was like, if Luka Doncic is not happy, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter.
That's
you can
right.
get the.
That's right.
Nothing else matters.
Right. And XJ phrased it as, rationale, like the rational move here. And he's not, of course, he's not wrong. Of course, he's not wrong. I've seen all over Twitter, a lot of Mavs fans agree with him and think that's the direction they should go. A lot of respected Mavs voices out there on Twitter and think that that's what they should now do and pivot and rest Luka. I saw a guy in a press conference. Was it Friday night or Saturday night? I don't remember.
It was it? No, it wasn't a back-to-back with Charlotte, was it?
So it's Friday night.
Yeah, so Friday.
So they asked him, how does this get better? He was giving one-word answers to everything McMahon was asking him. And then someone asked him, how does this get better? And he said, win games. It's really simple. And look, I think Luka's not above criticism. And I think the way they play doesn't always help the rest of the team. And I don't think anybody questions, and the way he whines, and boy, does he whine to refs, I think none of that is above criticism. I think it's one of the reasons that it's been such a struggle this year. But the idea that he's not the most ultra competitive guy out there on it every night, he's got that dog in him, as people like to say. This is a guy that thinks he can win every game, wants to win every game, thinks he can do it by himself, which sometimes is to his detriment. But the idea that you're going to tell Luka Doncic after that press conference, the way things have gone and the way his franchise has quote unquote tried to build, thank you, quote unquote tried to build around him. What, he's going to trust them? Oh, if we tank and you get the 8th pick, that's going to fix everything. I trust you guys to make the right pick. And by the way, the tanking gives you a point whatever percent of getting Wembanyama or Scoot or whoever else. Reality is most likely it's going to be the 9th or 10th pick if it doesn't convey. And Knicks. And you think Luka Doncic is going to be through the moon excited about the 9th or 10th pick that's going to save this franchise?
No.
It's easy for a fan to sit there and say fans also love draft picks. I'm not saying they're not valuable. They are. Of course they are. And again, if we were strictly being rational, if this was just a computer simulation, I think all of us would say they should tank at this point. What are the chances they win the title with this team right now where they are? Very, very, very slim. But you have to put into perspective what Luka thinks here, because that's ultimately, for a team like the Mavs, that's the only question.
No. Yeah.
Is What do we do to make sure this guy's happy, and signs here forever, and plays here forever, and gives us a chance to rebuild this thing around him? And if you're going to, good luck trying to convince him. And maybe it's possible. Maybe Cuban can do it. Try to convince him to sit out the last 8 games here. We have a chance to get the play-in. And Luka feels like if he's in the play-in, he could probably beat anybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, you could do it. They're not going to shut him down without his consent. I promise you that. They're not. So it's going to have to be with Luka's consent, convincing him that this, whatever X amount percentage you have of getting whatever pick, is worthwhile for him to sit out for the last X amount of games. I don't think it's so simple or rational to do. And that ignores the fact that they just traded 2 of their 3 best players to get a guy who's going to leave.
Well,
so from a franchise perspective, from an organizational perspective, it's not so simple to say, let's throw the season away. They just invested a lot in this season. Not only did they trade 2 of their best players, and it also, like, a guy in Spencer Dinwiddie who, like, say what you want about Spencer Dinwiddie. Spencer Dinwiddie's not a perfect player. You want to talk about another guy who's a gamer and who, like, goes out there and, like, gives a shit and, like, is a guy that, like, you could go into a playoff series with Spencer Dinwiddie and feel okay about it. I'm not saying obviously Kyrie Irving is Kyrie Irving and can do very special things, but as you just alluded to, Kyrie Irving needs to to throw it back to the Julius Randle thing. His mental needs to be right. And he's also entering unrestricted free agency. So now, as a Dallas Mavericks team, you are going to be met with, oh my goodness, what a fun choice this is. Do we give this man $250 million with a B, or do we accept whatever shit poo-poo platter, sign and trade, double sign and trade, I guess, because D'Angelo Russell would be involved, offer that the Lakers are going to put out there? And it's like, which of these choices is the more detrimental thing? And I don't, and then when you throw in the fact that they gave up I think it was 2028 first round pick, I believe, it's a distant first round pick for Kyrie Irving. You're limited in terms of the trade package you could put together. Yeah, you could offer a team 2 firsts and 2 swaps, but it's like, okay, is that, that with and shitty salary filler, and no really interesting young players. Yeah, I mean Josh Green, but like Josh Green isn't changing your life. That's going to get you the guy that's going to turn this. It's trending in the wrong direction. I'll just ask you very briefly: do you think this pick will convey this year? Do you think the Mavs are going to finish with a pick that will end up in the, putting aside like extreme lottery luck? Like, do you think the Mavs will, have one of the 10 worst records? Do you think they'll miss the play-in? That's what I should ask you. Man, let me look at the standings for a sec.
They do not. There is a Spurs game. There is a Spurs game.
The last game of the season is the Spurs. I'm looking at the rainy schedule. Is not easy. They have Indiana,
no, it is not an easy schedule.
Philly on Wednesday, the Heat on Saturday, the Hawks on Sunday, the Kings on Wednesday, the Bulls, the suddenly really good Bulls team on Friday.
4th best net rating since the All-Star break, and that was before.
Yeah, I would actually say they have a hard schedule remaining. I don't know what Tankathon has to say about it, but it's certainly not easy.
And by the way, Luka's going to miss unless they rescind.
Right, he's going to miss a game.
The technical. He's going to miss this Pacer game in Indiana for a team that they may pivot to tanking. I don't think they're tanking yet.
Tankathon has them as the 17th hardest schedule.
Yeah, Nate Silver Nate Silver replied to.
I saw you replied to you today.
Shout out Nate Silver.
Shout out Nate Silver.
But I think he has them as like the most likely scenarios that I believe he said the most likely scenarios they finish with the 10th worst record. Yeah. It's just wild. Based on if Luka's going to miss a game, we don't know how much Kyrie is going to play. God knows ever how much that guy's going to play. No, I think you have to assume it's not going to convey at this point, which is actually insane that they just lost 2 games to Charlotte. Is OKC going to go for it? It looks like it. They've lost 2 straight all of a sudden, OKC. That's the game I have now turned on to my second screen. OKC versus the officially tanking Portland Trail Blazers.
Man, that team. That's tankalicious over there.
There's a lot of this. This summer is going to be an interesting.
So presumably they're going to win that game. I would assume. Oh, they're only up 1.
It's close. I'm watching the game. It's close. Portland's made back here.
Let's go, Cam Reddish. Oh, he's not even playing. Oh, he is. 9 minutes off the bench, minus 17. Great. Minus 17 and a 1 point deficit. Okay, cool.
Is that what you want?
Oh, man.
Is he really minus 17 in 9 minutes?
Minus 17 and a 1.
Oh, my God. He's minus 17 in 9 minutes.
In 9 minutes, yeah. I think OKC is probably the team that you would hope falls out to allow Dallas in to the play-in. Because I think that's probably the most likely scenario. If Shea's still not playing back-to-backs, I don't know how many left they have. But yeah, I think if all together, right, if I have to assume that they don't make it in, and that doesn't convey, which is a bit tragic, frankly, for the Knicks, but also a little bit funny. And I think ultimately a really good lesson in having a little bit of patience. Maybe the best lesson, having a little bit of patience when something big happens, not getting emotional about it. And I think on both sides, I think Knicks fans were apoplectic, a lot of them, about the trade, the Porzingis. And I think that Mark Cuban was like celebrating and making fun of the Knicks on air the next day. And I think it's really a good lesson in being a bit more measured, because look at all this what's transpired since. It's pretty wild.
Okay, so we're gonna pick it up with our essay question for the day. We're running a little bit low on time, so we're not gonna spend too much time on this. But Andrew always writes these, and he does such a good job writing them. And I have some thoughts on this. Andrew writes this: people went to some dark places this week with Julius, RJ, losing 3 straight, etc. How would the season have to end to completely erase any of the goodwill that has been built up in our minds? If anything, can anything at all erase it? So I saw this earlier today, and I was funny because I was planning on bringing this up to you anyway. Here's where I'm at, and I wish this wasn't where I was at, because I wish like other things mattered more. Like I wish Emmanuel Quickley's development that we've seen this season, which has been nothing short of spectacular, like was the leading story. I wish the fact that Jalen Brunson went from being a guy who some people thought was overpaid to being a guy who maybe not a realistic shot at All-NBA, but like I don't know. I'm still holding out hope that he could find his name in 5th place on a few MVP ballots, like 3 MVP ballots, 4, 5, maybe, whatever. Like that's really encouraging. Julius Randle refining his form, like that's really encouraging. Like I wish these were the things that mattered, and the fact that we got, again, 72 games worth of, and it wasn't all good, but like the vibes after 72 games were as good as the vibes for any team in the NBA relative to like preseason expectations, other than maybe Sacramento. And yet, if the season ends and they, let's say, fall into the play-in and maybe lose a play-in game and then win the second play-in game and then like get smoked in 5 games to Milwaukee or something like that, or even if they fall to 6 and they ended up facing Boston or Philly and it just isn't the most competitive series. Now, as I say that, if they are fully healthy, do I think that there is a world where they would be in like a non-competitive series against Philly or Boston? No, I don't. I genuinely believe that if they are fully healthy, that they will fight, and they will, I don't know how many games those series would last, but like, I do think that there is a non-zero chance of a world where the rest of the season goes such that the narrative, which is, again, I am pitting that against the things that I listed before, the very real, tangible, undeniable progress that this team has made this season. If the season ends and the narrative is, even if it's slightly negative, I do think, first of all, I do think that that's possible because, again, narratives, they both start with N, but narratives are not nuanced. Narratives are the opposite of nuanced. So if the narrative is bad or even slightly bad, I do think that could undo a lot of the good that has been built up this season, because and this is the part that a lot of people are well, I don't know, maybe some people don't mind hearing this, but maybe there are other people, hello Robert Cross, who are not going to want to hear this. I still think the most important thing for this team is how they are viewed around the league and how other stars and potentially superstars view them, and is there an opportunity for them to make another move or two? And this is why, and again, I'm writing a newsletter on this for Monday. This is why I alluded to the Quickley thing before, where it's like, we love this team. Everybody who's listening to this wants to see Emmanuel Quickley retire as a Knick, and Quentin Grimes retire as a Knick, and like Jalen Brunson, I don't think Jalen Brunson's going anywhere, but like Jalen Brunson retires as a Knick. Jericho Sims at this point, like there's a lot of good vibes, and yet at the same time, there is a real chance that if this season ends with the positive as far as the narrative goes, I think they will have a chance to make the sort of move that would unfortunately require them to make a very difficult decision or two as far as parting with not only draft picks, but an important good young player on this team, but would also potentially catapult them into a different stratosphere of the NBA hierarchy. So I think there's a lot at stake here. I think there's a lot on the table, and I don't pretend to know what's going to happen. I don't even pretend to know what I want to happen in terms of the offseason. But overall, those are my sentiments.
I want to unpack that a little bit. So
Sure.
Are you saying that if things go really as poorly as we can imagine from here on out, that they're going to make a move for someone they shouldn't make a move for? Is that what you're trying to get to?
I wasn't even thinking that, but I do think that that's on the table.
Okay.
Which would be that's even worse.
Right. So what did you, when you said that they'd enter a different place in the hierarchy, what exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, no, that's to me on the positive end. Like if they, let's say even if they push Boston or Philly to 7 games, I think they could. I think they would be an appealing enough. They would be a good enough story this year. And let's say in doing so, Jalen Brunson had the sort of series he had last year against Utah. You know, maybe he does it again against Donovan Mitchell. Who knows? Like if Julius Randle performed more good than bad on the big stage. Like if these things happened, I think absolutely they'll be the talk of the summer. Yeah.
I'm going to channel. Here's where I'm going to channel Jeremy, because Jeremy is as good as anybody I know at prioritizing process over results. And I think I'm going to push back, and I think they've done enough this year, really, no matter where it goes. And that's not to say there isn't impact, and the specific impact to what you're referring to in terms of hierarchy and then their standing in the league and the experiences these guys get. Because I want them to be in high leverage playoff games and all that. I think there's a lot there. Overall, I don't think there's anything that could really happen from here on out that could cancel out and erase, I think was the phrasing of the question, the fact of the matter that they made one of the best signings they possibly could have made last offseason. They brought a guy who's a star in here, a borderline star, whatever. Reinvigorated the career of Julius Randle after what seemed like a disaster that he couldn't come back from. And have a bunch of young guys who, even, I would say other than Obi, for reasons we've talked about a million times, I think other than Obi, all of their young guys have taken positive steps this season and have increased their value. Even RJ Barrett, who I think is the least of those players, but I think even he has made important improvements that I think are worth recognizing, and have, although his money changes so much that maybe his as an asset doesn't improve, but I do think just as a player, his value in terms of how we look at him, I think has improved. So I with all the flexibility they have, all the draft picks they have, et cetera, I don't think there's anything that could happen from here on out that could erase what was a very successful season.
Good job by you doing the thing that I tell my own students to do all the time, and my daughter, actually. Read the whole question very carefully. I agree with you. There is nothing that they could do to erase or cancel out the good vibes. But I do think the level of positivity that we have been experiencing really since the beginning of December, and that has had the Knicks being talked about in a positive light on. And again, I definitely know this. There are fans who are like, "Who gives a shit?" Well, I think it matters, but the in a positive light on national platforms and those sorts of things, I think that level of positivity could change very much if the season did not end in the way that it has been going. I guess that's important nuance, though. That's important.
No, I think that's right. I agree. I still think the overall takeaway, like when they do the season in review, is going to be Brunson was an incredible signing, nice young core, need to make a couple more moves. I think that'll be ultimately like the takeaway. It won't be like the same old Knicks. You know, they've made such strides this year as an organization and the pieces that are in place that I still say, and again, it's not that, of course, everything has an impact, and I think it matters. I agree with you that the sentiment matters and the feeling around the team matters and all of that, and yet I still believe in the end of the day, the takeaway is going to be really no matter what happens that this franchise has taken really important steps this year. So that's where I come out.
Last thing, very briefly, none of this is fair. What I'm saying, not Benji's point. What I'm saying, this is not fair. This team had a 38.5 or 39.5 over under before the season. Even if they have what for them would be a very disappointing. What's the most realistic disappointing thing they could finish with? Let's just go crazy. Let's say they finish 3-4, and they finish the season with 45 wins. Maybe there were, I don't know, 10% of Knicks fans out there who thought this team would win 45 games. Now, granted, they changed the goalposts a little bit with the Josh Hart trade, and they sent out an asset, so that factors in a little bit here. But like, even considering that, like it will have been 45 wins objectively by any reasonable person. It's a successful season, and yet if they did that, how it would be talked about would be very different. Okay, enough about this. Let's talk about this after the season. Game ball. Let me read the candidates here. Our game ball of the week. Quentin Grimes, 20 points in back-to-back games, shooting 44% from three since the All-Star break. Julius Randle did have 57 points in a game this week, which was insane. RJ Barrett did put up 16, 3 and 3 on 46, 42, 78 shooting this week. I can't believe we have to boast about 46% shooting from RJ Barrett. Josh Hart, 58, 50, 100 shooting this week. Okay, thanks for putting that in there, Andrew. And then the person who was going to get our game ball from both of us does not need to be a conversation. The late, great Willis Reed. And I will just say one more thing, and then I'll toss it to Benji if he has anything he wants to say about Mr. Reed. With all due respect to Quentin Grimes, who gets jobbed of a game ball. I know you, but we have. This is just one of those things I think we need to do. If anybody has not, I don't know what you have as your pinned tweet, Benji. But if
I should pin that one, I'll pin it after this.
You should pin it. Benji went back and watched footage of Game 4 of the 1970 NBA Finals, which is the last fully healthy game that Willis Reed played, and went and did a game breakdown of Willis Reed's plays in that game. And it is, I mean, I could list all the reasons why you should go and check that out, but it is really special. Just as Willis Reed was really special. So anything else you want to say about Mr. Reed, the captain, before we move on?
Man, I'll say quickly, like, unfortunately, Dan Le Batard and his show, which I generally think is a good show and a thoughtful show and a funny show, and I kind of like Le Batard, but they kind of, it was a bit, and I get it. They like dismissed the 1970 walk out of the tunnel from Willis Reed in Game 7. That's maybe the most famous Knicks moment ever. I probably is unequivocally the most famous Knicks moment ever. Was Reed walking out of the tunnel, and they kind of minimized it because he's only scored 4 points in that game and then left the game, whatever. So in honor of that, I just want to go back to Willis Reed's numbers in the 1970 playoff run, which I should note. He faced the following teams in that 1970 run. The Knicks faced the Baltimore Bullets, who had center Wes Unseld, one of the best centers of all time.
Who won the MVP of the league the year immediately prior to the season.
That's right. Then they played the Milwaukee Bucks. Who was the Milwaukee Bucks center at the time, John?
He's a guy that went on to some renown. He was a scorer, right?
He was a scorer. His record was recently broken. But
then he can't be too good.
Exactly. So one Lou Alcindor at the time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of course.
Six MVPs eventually.
And then they played the Lakers in the finals, and they had a center by the name of Wilt Chamberlain. Might have heard of him.
Four MVPs. So 11 total MVP awards.
Those are the three centers that he went up against, Willis Reed went up against in the 1970 playoffs. Here are his stats. I'll go through them quickly. 30 and 21, 27 and 17, 12 and 5, 20 and 15, 36 and 36. 36 and 36 against Wes Unseld. 10 and 16, 14 and 14, 20. Then now we get to the Bucks series against Kareem. 24 and 12, 36 and 19, 21 and 10, 26 and 10, 32 and 10. Finals, 37 and 16 against Wilt, 29 and 15 against Wilt, 38 and 17 against Wilt, 23 and 12 in the game before he got hurt. So before we minimize Willis Reed because he only had 4 points in Game 7 when he was playing on one leg, maybe it was important for Dan Le Batard to read out those stats against three of the very best centers of all time in the 1970 playoffs when Willis Reed outplayed them all. That's what I got to say.
That was good. I am not old enough to remember 1970, but I am old enough to remember Hakeem Olajuwon's romp through the 2000, or excuse, oh my God, no, I'm older than that. The 1995 Western Conference playoffs, in which he and the NBA playoffs, in which he defeated the number 1, number 2, and number 3 seeds in the West that year, and then proceeded to defeat a 60, 61, 60, whatever, 60-something win Magic team in the finals. And that was really impressive. And it was like, I remember at the time, it was held up as like, wow, is this like the greatest playoff achievement? You know, like it was talked about as like one of the greatest playoff achievements of all time. Again, Hakeem Olajuwon is talked about as one of the, like, on the fringes of the top 10 players of all time. Go back and look at what Willis Reed did that year. And then you could also look at basically every other year from like 1969 onward, and that he was healthy and available, and like what the Knicks did. And you could ask yourself questions about like, man, what if this player had not gotten unfortunately hurt with his knee and the whole thing? But I digress. Thank you for going through those stats. I appreciated that.
Cheers to you, Willis Reed. Rest in peace. Rest in power, as Carmelo said.
Yes, rest in power. I like that. Okay, detention. Julius Randle, 3 techs in 3 games. Some not great defense against Orlando in particular. RJ Barrett had the Orlando game as well. It's amazing. We were tied in that game after 3 quarters with those two guys putting forth those levels of performances. Emmanuel Quickley had a poor shooting week and has had really a poor shooting 9 games since the Boston game that he exploded in 55 minutes. Mitchell Robinson, Andrew says, dude, put the phone away. Also, be better on the court. And then Obi Toppin, 5 for his last 14, 2 of his last 9 from 3, minus 26 in just 36 minutes this week. Let's see. This detention goes to the person who lost the previous week. So you could put the first person in detention.
For all the reasons we discussed earlier, I'm going to put Mitch in detention. I'm going to put Mitch in detention. Yeah.
I'm sure I did enough to upset the RJ Hive already, so I will put Julius in detention, who I defended Julius after the Orlando game, but I will put him in detention now and, be better. Be better,
Can I say one more thing about Julius? Really, one short thing.
Please.
I have a feeling that a lot of this probably has to do with both mental and physical fatigue for a guy who's played the most minutes in the NBA. I think you have to account for that, not as an excuse, but as somewhat of as a part explanation for what went on this last week, especially after a 57-point explosion where he still lost, which I think was very frustrating and difficult for him.
Oh, yeah.
I have a feeling, and I am hopeful, that a 3-night off, this couldn't have come at a better time. The Knicks got the weekend off at home. And I'm like, I think that's probably really important for them at this stage. And they now have a much lighter schedule as the season ends. And you have this Monday night game against Houston that you have to just take care of business, but hopefully should be like a get well game. And I think we can get the vibes rolling again with that. And for Julius and for everybody else with this break and a Monday game against Houston, and then we get rolling again to the end of the season. That's where I'm at.
Leave it to you to say the thing 72 minutes into the show that I wanted to say in like the first 2 minutes of the show, which is that I am very hopeful that we're going to look back on this week and be like, oh yeah, remember when the Knicks, we looked at, like, we were like, oh, what's wrong with the Knicks? And it was just like, wait a minute. They had been through just an absolutely grueling season in this way. Like, it feels like, I'm trying to think of the analogy that is the most fitting, but like they've been on the ledge for 4 months. It feels like, it's like one wrong step and we're tumbling down. Another wrong, tumbling down, and it's like, think about what that does. Think about what that does to you. And then so long story short, I hope we're looking back at this week as the week where it just kind of got to them and they just needed some time away.
And they got it. Yeah.
They got it. But as you say, go out and do what you're supposed to. And this is no offense against the Rockets, who were feisty for a little bit there. They won 3 in a row, and even in some of their losses recently were feisty. But like, go out and take care of business. Like, please. Okay. Benjy, I don't think you have anything to do for this because Jeremy already phoned in his prediction. So Jeremy kept me alive. Jeremy's winning the season series for predictions 11-9. I am 9-10. I need to win the last 2 weeks to tie, and then I don't know how that works. If we tie, does it go on to the playoffs? Or the playoffs counted anyway? Like I don't. We need Andrew here to rule on this. We should say shout out to APJP who's producing tonight. GMAC has the night off. Okay, the 4 games they alluded to: Monday home Houston, Wednesday home Miami, Friday. Oh, sorry, that's at Cleveland. We misspoke before. Friday is not home for Cleveland. Friday is at Cleveland, and then Sunday home for Washington. I don't know if this is. You know what? Let me say what I have because I don't want to be accused of cheating. I'm gonna go. Do I want to go with my heart here? Yeah, I am going to go with my heart here. I'm going to go 3-1. And I know Jeremy's going to take 2-2. Benjy, what would you have gone with?
Jeez. 3-1.
Okay. So that makes me feel a little bit better. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, announcements before we finish up. Dream, Draft Rules Everything Around Me, is back with a new episode with the one and only Chris Persianen, Fordham beat reporter for the New York Knicks. He's been doing a great job covering them, but he's also been doing a great job covering the draft prospects in the upcoming draft as the NCAA tournament has been going on. I am hopeful that maybe next weekend will be the weekend that I watch my first minute of NCAA tournament action.
I'm with you, man. I'm like De'Aaron Fox, who basically said I can't watch it. It's so bad, and I'm kind of with him, honestly.
I just...
The drama is great. The basketball is just really tough.
Yeah. It's not what you want, but whatever. Chris is all over that, and obviously he's going to answer all your draft questions. And man, with the Mavs pick potentially being really in play in a significant way, like it's going to be interesting because then you never know. The Knicks may want to make that pick.
It's amazing. I never ever thought this season we'd be rooting for the Mavs.
It's wild. It's
wild, and now we need them to win some games. It collapsed so fast.
I mean. Oh my God! Anyway, so that is Tuesday at 7:00. Tuesday at 7:00. Set your calendars.
Chris is so good. Let me just lie. Chris is man. Last 2 years, he's like taken over this role and the study, and he's crushing it. And he knows his stuff. So definitely tune in to the great Chris. And
tune in to the great Benjy, if you are a KFS patron. We're doing a playback this week. Andrew has question marks next to playback, which means we're not really sure when that's going to be yet. We'll do a playback this week, I think. Pretty sure, unless, yeah. So we're scheduled to do a playback this week. We'll see when that is. You catch me, Benjy, Jeremy, Andrew, the whole crew. If you are, again, a KFS patron, I think that's the mellow tier or up. I don't know. We have too many tiers. I think that's it. The great Benjy Ritholtz. How you doing? Was this fun doing? I think it was your first Sunday show, right?
Definitely first Sunday show. I feel inadequate in Jeremy Cohen's shoes, but I hope I did all right. Shout out Jeremy, the best in the biz. Thanks for having me. Always fun. Let's have a great last several games here and start preparing for the playoffs. Here we go.
He says with confidence.
I do. We got our rest. We're ready to go. Rearing to go. Monday night's the start.
I want to update. Cam is up to 18 minutes. He has a field goal and 2 free throws. And a steal.
They're up 2.
And a turnover. Minus 20 for the game.
OKC's up 2. Let's go, Portland. Give us one. Give us something.
Wait, you're rooting for Portland.
Yeah, because it's good for Dallas.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I like this. Okay, I know I should be rooting. I should be only thinking about the draft pick, but I love this OKC story, even though you abhor their basketball.
No. Listen, I'm growing, and I'm evolving.
You're
okay.
Sure you are.
The Presti Hive, the Presti Mafia, they've beat me down.
Oh my god! Yeah,
they
literally
beat me
one
down.
of these
and
days.
Honestly, fairly so. I think it was all coming from a good place. And I think my point really was the whole time, like, this team is good. Let them be good. And
they are good.
They have.
Although Portland might have their number because Shaedon Sharp has 29 points on 13 shots, I think. And Giddey with a 3 to give 114-109 lead with 2:10 left. Okay, I'm going to watch the end of this game. Thank you, everybody out there. Thank you, Benjy. Thank you, APJP. Of course, thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back with another episode of the Knicks Film School podcast soon. We got Dream pre and post game coming up, obviously, for the Houston game. God help everybody if I'm on here after that game and I'm not happy. I really want to be happy after that. So yes, let's all keep our fingers crossed, shall we? All right, peace out, everybody.